Welcome back to Closer Look, Friday edition. It's the 18th day of July with Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Another week has come and gone. I love weekends.
I was so excited that you were going to have a yo-yo in your hand when this show started.
True story, I looked high and low for one.
Did you really?
I
Did you go to some stores and try to buy one?
I didn't say I went shopping for one. I just looked high and low. I did not find one, but I will find one at some point.
All right. I'm surprised, like a yo master like yourself. I thought you'd have like a drawer full of like vintage yo-yos.
A yo master.
Well, you were telling all.
I used to have a bunch of them.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You were saying all the tricks that you could do with it.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, this week's been a kind of a yo-yo, up and down. Another good week.
Yeah, another great week. I'm excited. It's the weekend of the Open Championship.
Yeah.
So I'll be finding a couch, holding it down, and watching some golf.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
This is, so everyone knows too, this is our second, we made it through the second week of this show. We had a trial run a few weeks ago. It went really well, I thought. This week went okay too. We seem to be managing this okay.
We do, and also for those of you that don't know, our contract is week to week. So we've made it.
That's right. So if you don't watch, right? What are the YouTubers? If you don't like and subscribe, no.
Yes, you bet. Yes,
that's it for us. So there'll be 2 new hosts here one week if we don't do it.
Yeah, at least one anyway. Okay. And I won't tell you which one. Important conversation today. Earlier this week, the Carney government announcing some measures for Canadian steel manufacturers.
Yeah, big news of the week in politics. Mark Carney was at a steel manufacturer in Hamilton,
right,
and some other federal officials were here in Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma Steel to announce basically cracking down on steel dumped mostly from China,
right,
with lower quotas and higher tariffs on those products, and then a whole bunch of other measures to help support the Canadian steel industry through what's been a very difficult few months. There's been a lot of reaction to those announcements, whether they're going to help, how much longer they'll help the Canadian steel companies make it. Because as we know, the key issue is the government's still negotiating a trade deal with President Trump.
Right.
And we have no idea how that's going to look. If you read the Trump social media or just any news, you see it fluctuates by the hour.
Oh, it's crazy.
25, 35, 50, 95, 114. It changes all the time.
Yeah.
So the message from a lot of people in the steel industry is, we need some certainty. If we kind of know what it's going to be, we can figure out how to go from there. So today we're going to be speaking with Mike Garcia, who's the CEO of Algoma Steel. He was on our podcast a few months ago for a really long, in-depth conversation. It was a fascinating chat. Few people know the industry better than he does. He can speak obviously for Algoma Steel, but also for the Canadian industry as a whole and how it works and what they're going through. So it'd be interesting to hear, because ultimately he would know best whether these measures are actually going to make a difference for steel manufacturers. It's just a time of uncertainty, Scott. I mean, we're a little bit biased because we live in Sault Ste. Marie. Our headquarters is in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, which is home to Algoma Steel. The entire city's on edge about what's going to happen to the plant. If I have my numbers right, it's more than 2,000 people directly employed by Algoma Steel. Countless others, whether it's contractors who work at the plant.
Well, the spinoff, right?
And the trickle down of this, right?
Yeah.
And this is happening in other communities as well. Hamilton's very concerned about the steel industry. Obviously, it's massive there. So it'll be interesting to hear what Mike has to say about whether these measures are going to make a big difference.
Michael Garcia, the CEO of Algoma Steel, joins us on Closer Look this evening. Mike, good to see you again. Appreciate you taking the time tonight.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
All right, let's start with the big news of the week, Mike. The Carney government announcing new measures to help Canadian steelmakers struggling in the face of Donald Trump's tariffs. We'll get into some of those details, but from your perspective, what's the most significant piece of the Prime Minister's announcement, the thing that means the most to Algoma Steel?
Well, in terms of the announcement, I think the thing that means the most is the government's willingness to acknowledge that the steel industry is of critical strategic importance to the future of Canada. And with that acknowledgement, there moves around protecting the domestic Canadian market from unfairly traded foreign steel. So that's probably the most significant piece that we've seen now. To give a little more detail, they made an announcement in June about the tariff rate quotas for foreign steel coming into Canada. And frankly, that announcement didn't really do anything to affect the structural issues and the landscape in the Canadian domestic industry, because that announcement announced tariff rate quotas. So it identified a group of countries and said, we're going to pay attention to the steel that you ship into Canada. And for free trade agreement countries that Canada has signed free trade agreements with, we're not going to really care how much steel you ship into Canada. So that was a problem. The other part was for non-fair free trade countries, you can ship up to 100% of your 2024 shipments. And again, that's an issue. And then after 100% of 2024, we're going to start imposing a 50% tariff. So that announcement did very little to affect the competitive landscape in the Canadian market. It still allowed foreign unfairly traded steel to flow into Canada. That's been flowing into Canada for years now. It's gotten worse since there's a 50% tariff, a strong 50% tariff on any steel that goes into the United States. So steel that might have once been headed towards the United States can now, divert into Canada. Mm-hmm. So that was back in June. This week's announcement went further with that structure and said, okay, if you're a free trade country, you can now no longer ship unlimited quantities of steel into Canada without a tariff. You can only ship up to your 2024 level. So that helps a little bit. A lot of the unfairly traded steel that we compete with in the Canadian market is from free traded agreement countries like South Korea. Mm-hmm. So it does a little bit to at least not let them go above 2024 levels. I wish it did more, but it did something. And then for non-free trade agreement countries, it set the level at 50%. It was 100%. Now it's 50% of 2024 before they incur tariffs. So that helps a little bit also. Non-fair traded agreement countries are also part of the landscape. So I think that was the most significant part of the announcement. The announcement also talked about making the federal liquidity support and financial support more accessible. We've taken a look at that. It frankly doesn't make it any more appealing to Algoma right now. It's not an attractive offer that the government is making. So we've got more discussions scheduled with them because that may become important to us at some time. And so we if we're going to access it, we want it to be able to be something that's fair and accessible by Algoma. I think the last part of the announcement was the $1 billion for Strategic Innovation Fund. That helps long term. If there is an opportunity to make an investment, a further investment in the company that could allow us to be more competitive and serve the needs of the Canadian market better, there's that type of opportunity. And then there's the up. I think it's a top up or the strengthening of employment insurance benefits. Obviously, we would love for none of our employees to ever have to access that, but if they do, I think that was announced as well. Mm-hmm.
Mike, the issue of the dumping of steel specifically from China is an issue that you've talked to us about, that other steel executives, and it's been an issue for years. What does this announcement mean for steel coming from China in particular? Does it limit it a lot more? Does it put higher tariffs on it?
It really strengthens it because the government announced last year, almost a year ago, not quite a year ago, a 25% tariff on Chinese steel. What this announcement did is it strengthened it, and it also said we're going to track the origin of any steel coming into Canada, and if that steel originated in China in terms of being melted and poured there, but then went to some other country, whether it's a free trade agreement country or non-free trade agreement country, and got transformed into some other product, pipe or structural tubes or something like that, we're going to take action against that because we're going to track this steel back to its home source. So it really strengthened everything the government of Canada is doing to to protect our market from unfairly traded Chinese-specific steel, and we applaud that, and that's a very welcome measure.
Mike, just to be clear, though, hasn't the steel industry been asking for these kinds of measures against China for years?
We have. I mean, China, as a fundamental part of their industrial policy, has invested in and built and largely government-owned or government-invested in steel industry that has a capacity to produce 1.1 billion tons of steel per year. Even though China is an incredibly large economy and consumes a lot of steel, they don't consume $1.1 billion. So that was 1.1 billion tons of steel. So that was a government decision to say, we're going to build the largest capacity of steel in the world. We're going to subsidize all these companies that are doing this, give them money to build this capacity, because we want them to employ thousands and thousands of Chinese workers, and we want this steel going all over the world because that is what we believe is best for China, and we're going to destabilize frankly, the global steel market. So they've been at this for years.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's been a lot of worry around the Canadian steel industry for the last few months with these tariffs. You've talked to us about it. Even we're in Sault Ste. Marie, the whole community is concerned about the state of the steel plant. So obviously, there's a lot of weight on your shoulders and the people who run Algoma Steel. How much better do you feel today based on all these announcements that the Carney government made? Do you feel a lot better about, the long-term viability of Algoma Steel or going forward over the next few months?
The short answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because we are currently paying a 50% tariff
mm-hmm.
on steel. And we cannot survive as a company, regardless of what the future might look like and future ships made with Canadian steel, future bridges made with Canadian steel, future further work by the government to make the Canadian market more attractive, more competitive for domestic producers. That all takes time. And if we're paying a 50% tariff, we don't have that time.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't. If we're paying a 25% tariff, we have a little more time, but we really don't have much time at all. So until we can understand what the tariff rate is going to be going forward, and August 1st has been talked about as an important date and a goal or a target for having a trade deal done. Until we understand that what the tariffs are going to look like for the rest of this year and for next year and hopefully the year after, I'm not going to feel good, because I know that if the 50% tariff is in place for any length of time, for any extended period of time after August 1st, that's going to have serious consequences for Algoma Steel. And so I won't feel better until we understand where that tariff is and what it's going to look like. Obviously, if it stays at 50%, I'm not going to feel good about it, but
mm-hmm.
at least we'll have certainty,
mm-hmm.
and we won't have to wonder about what we're going to do. We'll have clarity in terms of what's the playing field we're going to be playing on.
And there is potential that is what it is as of August 1st. It stays at 50% or goes 35%. What is the way forward then, Mike, for your company?
It's really going to depend on what that tariff looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I think if the tariff comes down to a level that we can understand how our business can survive, then the future is bright. We can continue to ramp up our electric arc furnace. Algoma Steel has invested over $900 billion on building this new electric arc furnace facility. We produced our first heat of green steel last week. That's an incredible milestone. We're very excited about that. As part of that investment, we had fantastic alignment and support from the government of Canada. That was a great example of the government saying, this is what's important to us. We're going to put this carbon tax on the industry. We're going to make it more and more expensive for large steel producers who produce steel in a traditional blast furnace. We're going to make it more and more expensive for these producers to compete. because we want to decarbonize the economy. We want Canada to decarbonize. So Algoma saw that preference of the government, that policy, that alignment. We talked to them about, okay, we can make this investment, $900 billion investment in the company. We can convert to green steel, but it's going to take a few things. It's going to take the capital to do it. Frankly, because we had made a lot of profits in 2022 and 2021. We had a very strong balance sheet. We plowed a lot of money into this investment to build these electric arc furnaces. And the government also stepped up with a $200 million contribution through the Strategic Innovation Fund. So we had a $200 million loan from the government to help with that $900 million investment. That loan is sitting on our books. If we can complete the transition, go to green steel production and lower our carbon emissions like we believe we're going to, then when that loan comes into the repayment period beginning in 2030, it becomes a very attractive deal for us, where if we can make reach the commitments we made to the government, that loan gets relieved. 1/10 of it gets relieved over the next 20 years. So by 2040, we could get relieved of that loan with no payments if we reach our part of the bargain. So we made that $900 million investment, and I hope that the situation exists where the tariff into the U.S. is low enough, and all of this great pivot of building Canada strong and putting in real preferences for Canadian steel and building the economy with Canadian steel. If that all starts to happen, then the future is going to be incredibly bright for Algoma Steel. But right now, with this 50% tariff, the future is very uncertain.
And that's the big question. You talk about 2030, 2040. Are we going to be here? Will the company be here in 2030, Mike?
If it's a 50% tariff, I don't know. We're going to try our best to continue to be here. It would take some extreme measures, but we won't know exactly what that will take until we know the tariff. So if you can tell me exactly what the tariff rate is going to be for the next 10 years, I can give you a very good answer on that. If you can't tell me exactly what the tariffs are going to be, then right now I don't have a great answer for you.
We've tried to get President Trump on the show, so if he comes on, will that be the first question we ask him? Go ahead, Scott.
Mike, let's get back to the electric arc furnace for a sec. Obviously a major milestone. How did it feel to get it fired up? It must have been incredibly rewarding for you and the entire team.
It was great. We were just out there a couple days ago with Minister Haydu, showing her the complex, and walking through the area, showing her the furnaces, taking her to the control room, and it really struck me when I was up there that 4 years ago, that would have been an empty dirt plot or a dirt lot within. We would have been standing outside the our melt shop in just a patch of dirt. To see what we're in now and what we have now, and the fact that we're already making steel, and we've only just begun. We've only made the one heat of steel, and we've got another campaign planned in a few days. But we're starting, and to see the fruition of all that work and investment it makes me incredibly proud of all the men and women at Algoma Steel.
Given everything that's going on around it, though, Mike, and all the distractions, is it somewhat bittersweet?
I wouldn't say it's bittersweet. You're always going to have challenges. Nobody envisioned a challenge like COVID-19. That was right. Certainly there were people talking about global pandemics. Nobody had it number one on the things they worried about when they went to bed, but it happened, and the world had to deal with it. We didn't. You can go on and on about where we dealt with it really well and where we dealt with it very inexperienced, Willie. And if we had to do it again, we would have done it different. But these are men and women dealing with what happens to the best of their ability, and that's kind of what we're what we're in now. I wouldn't say it's bittersweet. It's just something we have to deal with. We have to do our very best and leave absolutely no stone unturned to protect the men and women of Algoma Steel, protect the future of Sault Ste. Marie, and protect the investment that we've made in this company. I talked about a $900 million investment in electric arc furnace. We also made a $130 million investment in our plate mill. We modernized our plate mill. We've had, it was a rough startup, no doubt about it, but we've got a fantastic plate mill right now. There's more things we can do with our plate mill going forward to make it even more suited for the type of defense applications and future applications here in the country of Canada. So, we've made in this investment, and I would love nothing more than to have a market environment where these investments can really pay off for the people at Algoma Steel and the people in Sault Ste. Marie.
There's many people who would agree with that statement, Mike. Just one more question about the furnace. We talked a lot about the environmental impact, the fact that it's going to reduce carbon emissions at some point by 70%. We talked about that last time you were on the program. Some people have asked us too about the contaminants, the chemicals that will now be come out of the electric arc furnace, specifically dioxins and furans. And people have expressed concern about, well, how are we going to mitigate that? Is there something you can say to the community about how those chemicals are going to come out of this machine and how they're protected from them?
Sure. It's a pretty simple answers. We have a modern bag house that takes all of the fumes and particulates that are released from the furnace when you're burning, when you're melting scrap. So scrap comes in with trace amounts of these chemicals that are concerning, and so you have to be very mindful of that. So our bag house will capture all of those emissions. They'll be sucked into the bag house. The bag filter media will take all the particulates out of the air volume, as if you will. Those bags will then be captured. We'll be able to send the bags of furnace dust off to a processor that is equipped to deal with all of those challenging materials in there. The reason they want to do it, and the reason that there's an industry of EAF furnace dust operators, that processors that deal with EAF furnace dust, is not because it's full of challenging bad things and they want those things. It's because there's zinc in there. There's other elements which are valuable. So depending on the market price of zinc, there'll be times when people actually pay us for that dust because they have the complex processes and controls in place. They know how to deal with it. They know how to deal with the bad stuff, and they'll process the dust and capture that zinc because that's the valuable piece of it. If the price of zinc is really low, we'll be paying them to take the furnace dust. But either way, we've identified who's going to take that furnace dust. It just so happens right now, although this may change, right now the best companies equipped to safely transport and handle that furnace dust are on the U.S. Side, so we know who they are, and we have agreements with them that once we start producing furnace dust, they'll be processing it. Yeah. So it's true. You have to handle EAF furnace dust very carefully. You can't just landfill it. You can't just do something irresponsible for it. You have to have a very professional, very capable partner that takes it and recycles it, and you have to comply with all the regulations for shipping it and everything. So at the end of the day, this is something the EAF industry in the U.S. has been doing for 50 years. 70% of the steel in the U.S. is made with EAFs that have bag houses that then process and dispose of their furnace dust. So it's a well-known challenge in the industry that the industry knows how to process.
So these chemicals obviously aren't just being emitted into the air here in Sault Ste. Marie.
No, not at all. They're captured through if you come to the EAF, you'll see the large 20-foot diameter baghouse ducts that take the dust from the furnace to the baghouse and then into the baghouse. And I can tell you from watching the startup of the EAF, that baghouse is operating very well. And there's we don't even have the doghouse completely built. The doghouse that these furnaces will eventually sit in and be completely enclosed in. But even without the doghouse, that fume treatment plant, that baghouse was operating at full capacity, and it was sucking off almost all those fumes, and there was no particulates escaping into the melt shop. It wasn't dusty or we were really happy with the way that baghouse is performing.
Mike, the last time that you were on this program, I want to point it out again to our listeners and our viewers. You're an American citizen, a former military officer who served in Operation Desert Storm, and now you're running a major Canadian steel manufacturer. What are fellow Americans saying to you?
It depends on which American you talk to. We have 340 of my fellow Americans. And roughly half of them voted for President Trump, and roughly half of them voted for the person who was running against him, Vice President Harris. So
right.
It won't surprise you when I tell you that America seems very divided right now, and I have friends and family members who don't spend a lot of time thinking about it and say, okay, well, President Trump seems to be doing the right thing. I like what he's talking about. He's making America strong. And I have friends and family members who are completely, what should I say, that are very worried about having President Trump as the president. I think for my family members, even the family members I have who are supporters of President Trump, they very much want Algoma Steel to succeed. They, when it comes to tariffs specifically, they don't want tariffs because they know, their little brother is living here in Canada and doing his best to make Algoma Steel as successful as possible. I've got 4 sisters and a brother. They've all been up here to Sault Ste. Marie. Most of them I've toured through the EAF, and they're big fans of the EAF. But it's I will say there's one addition to my profile. Not only am I an American citizen, but I'm also a permanent resident of Canada. I've gotten my permanent residency, which I worked hard.
Congratulations!
Yeah, that's great.
It's the first step on becoming a Canadian citizen. So. I love making my life here in Canada, and it's something I want to continue to do.
That's amazing. Just to refresh we appreciate all your time. We just have a few more questions. Just to refresh everyone's memory as well, how much steel do Canadian steel manufacturers were they shipping to the U.S. before all this? Is it half? Is it more than half? It
was about half of what Canadian producers made, and a little bit more than half of what Algoma made. And it's interesting the way we got into that situation. There's kind of 2 reasons. Number one, we got into that as an industry because it made so much sense. There was no tariff between the U.S. and Canada. If you look at where Algoma Steel is geographically located and where the steel makers in Hamilton are geographically located, we were a perfect match for the automotive supply chain, which ran across both borders, for a lot of manufacturing supply chains, which ran across both borders. We're a fantastic steel supplier to our customers. A lot of them are in the Midwest. We can get steel very, very cheaply to them. So that was part of it. But another part of it was because we have consistently had this very cheap, unfairly traded foreign steel coming into Canada. So it was hard for us to compete, when there was a shipbuilder that was making ship, and needed ship plate in Vancouver. It was hard for us to get it there at a really low competitive cost when they could bring it in from China or elsewhere at a ridiculously low cost. But so we maybe didn't scream as loud as we should have been screaming when we were losing that Canadian business because we had U.S. business. But I tell you, that's yesterday's landscape. I think going forward, I can tell you, I don't want to get back to the point, even if tariffs go back to zero tomorrow. I don't want to get back to the point where Algoma Steel ships 60% of our steel to the U.S. I think it's just too risky. I would rather 60, 80% of our steel goes to Canadian customers and builds Canadian ships and bridges and defense vehicles and builds Canada strong because there's just too much risk in apparently crossing the border. I'm sure we'll still have some U.S. customers, but I would love nothing more than this company to be the flagship steel producer for the country of Canada. And I think that if we can get through this current challenge with the tariffs as they are today, I think that that can be our future if everything works out.
We've heard so much about this Building Canada and the major projects, and it was talked about by the Prime Minister this week with those announcements. Is that realistic? Is there enough demand in Canada and those kind of big projects to offset what you've lost in U.S. exports? There is.
I think it's going to take some work. Number one, we're going to have the breathing room to do it. And if there's a 50% tariff, we're just not going to have the time to do it. If there's a 25% tariff, we'll have a little bit more time, but we still won't have unlimited time. We'll have a relatively short amount of time. There's a lot of steel that we could just with a strong border protection, further protection and measures by the Canadian government to further ensure that the Canadian domestic market is fair for the domestic producers. There's a lot of immediate volume that we can pick up. Some of it we can't pick up because we don't make that type of steel. For instance, we don't make structural steel. Nobody in Canada does. Nobody in Canada makes rails. So that type of opportunity will take further investment in the steel industry, further investment in Algoma Steel to produce the type of steel that isn't made in Canada, so that people buying that steel have a Canadian option. That takes more time, but it can all be done given enough time, enough will, enough government alignment and government support in the right areas. I'm not saying we need nothing but government money to do all this. Government is a partner in all of this. And if we know that the market is going to be there for us and we're going to be able to compete for it, then the investment decision, kind of solves itself if it makes sense. So all of that is possible. And I do think the Canadian consumption, if you look at just the high numbers, Canada consumes between 14 and 16 million tons of steel every year. Canada only produces around 12 million tons of steel. So at a high level, it makes sense. Now, the devil's always in the details because not all of that 16 million tons of consumption or 14 million tons of consumption is in the right product form. So there's parts that we can't make. But given enough time and enough will and enough alignment, this industry and Algoma Steel can do it.
You mentioned earlier about hoping that your employees wouldn't have to take advantage of some of the employment insurance benefits that the Prime Minister talked about. Can you give us a sense of how President Trump's presidency has affected the workforce at Algoma Steel? How many people have lost their jobs because of all this uncertainty?
So we've already, unfortunately, right now we've been paying a 25% tariff since March and a 50% tariff since June. That has been very challenging for us. And we've had to lay off around 200 of our employees, around 10% of our professional and technical staff. So it's been quite impactful from that point. We've reduced and tried to eliminate or slow down any number of spending that we're doing anywhere. If it makes sense to do it, we haven't slowed down the EAF because that's our future. We're kind of halfway across the stream, if you will, with EAF production. We got to get to the other side to have the best cost position. So we haven't slowed that down. We're being as flexible as we can. We're being creative. We're trying to run our schedules in the most efficient and flexible way. That's created a hardship on employees. It's not easy. I would love nothing better than to tell every one of our employees exactly what their shift schedule is going to be for the next six months, but we just can't do it. We have to be as absolute flexible and nimble as we can be right now, without sacrificing our values and without sacrificing safety. But we have to do things now that we've never tried before, and I think that's the attitude here in the employee base and in Sault Ste. Marie. We're everybody's nervous, everybody is uncertain about what the future is going to bring, but we're focusing on what we can control, and I think that's the number one thing we're trying to do is focus on what we can control.
I think you answered my next question. My next question was, what's your message to current employees? But I think you answered it. Is there anything you didn't say there?
No, that's it. Focus on what we can control and work together. And there's got to be communication. There's got to be trust. The last thing we need is friction and disagreement and tension between between ourselves, because we have a huge external environment that is very unfavorable to us now, and so we've got to get through this together. We can't get through it without trust and working together and coming up with the best plans. But it brings a lot of stress and tension for people. It's hard to deal with uncertainty, and we're trying our best to make sure every employee knows what it is we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and build that that culture where, okay, it's a very stressful time, it's a very challenging time for the company, but the one thing we have to do is work together and focus on what we can do. I can't control what the U.S. decides to do on tariffs. I talk to the Canadian government as often, very often, and we continue to speak as loudly as we can with the Canadian government about the need to protect the Canadian market and to do all sorts of things that they might be able to do. But again, their job is very challenging as well, and they've got they just don't worry about Algoma Steel. They've got an entire country to worry about.
Mike, this situation obviously could change on a dime and has, as we know, over the course of the last several weeks. Is there anything that we didn't touch on today that we missed that maybe you'd like to bring up?
Not really. I mean, it's a challenging time. It's the tariffs that are the greatest unknown right now. But once we have clarity on them, then we'll be able to continue to say, all right, we know what the road looks like, and our job is to navigate through it. And I feel a lot of confidence in this team. There's people in this company who have gone through a lot of challenges through the history of Algoma Steel, and I have so much respect and confidence in the team that you tell us what the you tell us what the road looks like, and we can get down that road. I'm not sure exactly how yet, because I don't know what that road looks like, but as soon as we know what that road looks like, we're going to do our best to get down that road.
All right. I'm sure this won't be the last time that we spend some time together. Mike Garcia, CEO of Algoma Steel. Always good to see you, Mike. Thanks for this tonight.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Wow. Talk about a candid, non-sugar-coated conversation with Mike.
Yeah, I respect that about Mike Garcia.
No question.
Yeah, you ask him questions and he answers them. I'm sure there'll be people who watch this podcast and don't think he gave good enough answers, but he didn't mince words about the fact that the plant is the steel industry in its entirety in Canada is kind of hanging by a thread right now. We don't really know which direction it's going to go. In this community, Algoma Steel is in the same position. They just don't know. Its very survival is at stake, right? And he said it flat out when you're talking about, well, in 2030, we might not have to pay back this government loan based
But do we get there?
Do we get to 2030? It's 2025. We have no idea where this plant's going to be.
And you got to think that at 50% tariffs, if those are maintained, they won't need to worry about that.
I think for sure. I think that's exactly, if you read between the lines what he was saying, that's exactly it. It has to be lower than that. And he said it too, that 25%, they go back to 25, at least it gives them a little bit of runway to figure out what the next plan is going forward. It was encouraging to hear him say that there's been differing opinions on this about whether there's enough projects, big projects in Canada to use enough Canadian steel that would offset what they've lost in exports to the United States. And he seems to think that there's enough. There's got to be some adjustments because, for example, we don't make rail in Canada. So they would have to, someone would have to invest in a facility that could do that. But it is encouraging, and in that sense that there's a potential for that. But again, I don't. This podcast is across our network, but we're based in Sault Ste. Marie, and obviously the entire city is concerned about what's happening with Algoma Steel, and it's the same in Hamilton with the factories there. And I just can't imagine a Canada without its own steel industry. Could you imagine that?
I cannot imagine that. No.
You're getting all your products sourced from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we do appreciate Mike coming on for the second time, like we said, and
you know what I like about Mike? Here's an American who moved to Canada for a high-paying executive job, now has gotten his Canadian citizenship, so he's all in.
Yeah.
He's not just here to do the job and then take the money and run. He wants to see this through. He wants to win the fight, and he wants to do it as a Canadian.
It seems that way when you talk to him. I mean, he's in it. This is what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Like and I think people like him who lead big companies, they think differently than most people, right? They're
no question.
They're strategic thinkers. They're thinking the big picture, and they love the challenge. So I'm not saying that they would especially love this challenge. It's not ideal. But I also think of and we touched on this in the show, imagine you're a company that invests $900 million in a major piece of technology that you think is going to change the game for your company. And you never could have foresaw that this issue was going to be happening at the same time as it went live. It's quite a collision. It's quite a collision.
And his comparison with the pandemic was a good one too. Yeah.
And I think too, like all border communities where we are, we literally can go outside our door here and see Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan across the river, where there's massive cranes there now because they're redoing the Soo locks there.
Right.
And you see it reminds you of just how close neighbors we are, how intertwined the economies once were. They literally got the steel on a truck, went across the bridge, and it was there. So again, it was interesting though to hear him talk about, even if they go back to 0% tariffs, that he wouldn't think it'd be strategically smart to just start shipping 60% of their steel over there. They need to be thinking differently. So who knows? We've heard this a lot where people have said this is an opportunity. Trump's an opportunity for us in Canada to rethink the way we do a lot of things. Yeah. And I think Michael's thinking that way.
And August 1st is the supposed deadline.
No,
it's a fluid deadline.
On July 31st, Trump will push it back
to
September 1st. I mean, this is the challenge. But he did not sugarcoat things. This is not a small blip that the company's going through where they're going to say, yeah, we will. He's not here trying to spin and say everything's going to be fine. It's not fine. They've already laid off 200 people, as he said, and the very survival of the plant is at stake based on what happens supposedly on August 1st.
Time will tell. All right, that's it for us tonight and for the week. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, the Village Media Network, and of course, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. For Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Thanks for watching Closer Look tonight. We're back Monday night at 7. Have a great weekend.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.